Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
A July poll found that 59% of registered voters supported President Biden's plan to withdraw all U.S. troops by September 11th, compared with 25% who said they were opposed. The question seems not so much to focus on whether or not America wants to be out of this 20-year war, but what becomes of Afghanistan after we leave and whether or not the withdrawal is happening too quickly. If you ask a lot of lawmakers, the answer is there's a lot of issues with the way the withdrawal is happening, and that military estimates around it may be taking 18 months as opposed to only a few weeks for Afghanistan to fall seem grossly inaccurate. So what is going on, and what is President Biden's perspective? I mean, there seems to be a lot of criticism. Is the criticism warranted? What's his opinion? And what's the validity of that argument? That's what we're looking at today. For a place that we spent 20 years, it seems worthy of our time to discuss the implications of leaving and what's next. But of course, a conversation on world events and our presence in Afghanistan would simply not be complete without
TrueChat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Well, for those of you who are old enough like me, it brings back the memory of what happened with the fall of Saigon in Vietnam. And not that there's a true comparison there. I'm not sure there really is. Even though Mitch McConnell tried to make it, it does give those of us who are a little bit older cause to reflect on and use that time period to maybe make our decisions. But we're going to try to give you some perspicacious opinions today. Perspicacious, Perspicacious, 4 syllables. It's an adjective, and it means having keen judgment or understanding, acutely perceptive. So we're going to try to have perspicacious opinions on this matter today, hopefully give you some insight that you hadn't thought of, and give you something to think about and talk about around the water cooler or the dinner table.
So, I mean, this is a question that's plagued American presidents, pretty much since Bush, right? Which is, when do we leave Afghanistan? If so, when and how? And I think the answer has increasingly become, I mean, we saw back with the election of President Obama, right? A promise to get out of these places. And basically, I mean, if you read his book, if you listen to what he said over time, he changed his mind on that. And even right when we tried to pull out of Iraq, everything went relatively poorly and ended up sending troops back. So there was been a lot of, and then President Trump, right? Same thing. We're gonna do what Obama didn't get done. We're gonna get him out of there, and didn't get it done, right? Did get a deal struck with the Taliban, and obviously they're not following through on that now, but didn't actually get the troops out. But now we have President Joe Biden, right, who's been saying for pretty much since we first went to Afghanistan that he wants to get us out of there. And by God, it seems like he's going to do it regardless of whether or not anybody else says that we should, right? Because, I mean, we know this is against pretty much everybody at the Pentagon, right? I mean, everybody's saying, this is not the way to go. But it's been no secret, right? I mean, this has been his position for about as long as everybody can remember. And even in President Obama's book, when he made decisions to send additional troops, he noted that, Joe Biden was one of the guys that was saying, I disagree. I'm going to get behind you because I'm your vice president, but I don't agree that that's what we should be doing. That he was steadfastly against more troops, and in fact was one of the people that continue to push for pull troops out.
You open, Justin, with everybody's been wondering, once we went in, when would we leave? And I have to, in this case, just to be honest, in 2001 in my classroom, I was debating with my students, why are we going? Because, and I think that's where President Biden is because if you look in this region, just this region alone, the British tried, to maintain peace and establish a government here. Then the Soviets did. If you remember Afghanistan and Rocky IV in the early 80s, okay? And they both failed. And so while 9/11 was a horrible event in American history, and obviously something had to be done, entering into this region of the world and saying, we're going to create a stable government and have a peaceful environment was something that those of us that looked around in history said, well, nobody else has been able to do it. What makes us think the United States can? And we were way in the minority because, the towers went down and Americans died. And so therefore we needed revenge. We needed to do something and show people the might of the United States in the world. And I understand the audacity of people to attack us in that manner. But to go in and think that you can build a government in a place where other world powers have been and failed kind of makes me shake my head. So while I don't like what's going on right now, I kind of have to, just to be honest, as we open up this discussion, that I've pretty much been, along with President Biden for the last 20 years, I've been in the minority, and that is, why did we go in the first place? To try to accomplish something that the British and the Russians couldn't do.
Important note, because I think everything that you said is very true. I think the difference is that people have this idea of nation building that you get to be done at some point.
Right.
And I think the point here is, right, it's been working because we've been there. And we've spent $83 billion since 2001 training and equipping the Afghan security forces. And, now it looks like
and we spent a whole lot more money just being there.
Well, yeah.
We've just, the $83 billion is just to train the Afghan security people force, right, who are not the Taliban to run their own country.
Oh, yeah. That's to say nothing of our own expenditures, right, of our military presence and all the aid that we've sent and everything else. But I think understanding why the problem is happening is because, we're there holding the new government's feet to the fire saying, hey, you got to do things, right? Like, for example, you have to pay your security forces. Oh, gee, you mean that people don't want to fight if you don't pay them? I mean, let's go all the way back to the American Revolution, Lance, right? That was a big problem.
Right.
I mean, until Congress got serious and said, hey, we got to pay these people and we got to pay them on time and we got to pay them well. And it can't be, we'll pay you someday, maybe, and we're going to pay you bad, because yes, people are willing.
Well, and you have to arm
fight,
them, but you have to give them bullets, and
because they have to have
they're not even
and
ammunition, and those things aren't being provided to the Afghan army right now by their own government.
We want to help make sure people understand this isn't an Obama, Trump. It's none of this, right? It's a simple. If you do not pay people who are supposed to be fighting what you promised them, you were going to pay them, and the enemy says, hey, we'll give you amnesty, and oh, by the way, we'll pay you on time every time. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's a really hard thing to sell for. If I keep fighting, I'm not going to get paid. I may lose anyway, and when I lose, they're going to kill me, and I don't even get paid for this. Or I can lay down I don't even have a weapon, so I don't have to lay it down. I can just quit and let the other side take over, and they're going to forgive that I fought for the other side, and they're going to pay me if I want to fight for them.
Well, and I think some people might say we're splitting hairs here, but that's not the problem of the United States government. We've given them the guns, the ammunition, the money to do it. It's the failure of the Afghan government that's been elected and is working with the United States to follow through because of the corruption in the area, the payoffs, all the different things, that were in existence back before the British first came in, that managed to survive and were still there when the Russians came in and tried to take over Afghanistan. And, by the way, those same payoffs and under the table doings on are still there now that the United States has been there 20 years. So this has been a problem in this area for more than the 20 years that the United States has been there. This is the way these people have governed themselves. Okay. And you say, well, that's just wrong. They need to do better. Well, okay. Do better by whose standards? Yours? Ours? They're perfectly fine with it. I mean, not all of them, but obviously the majority, because it's outlasted all these other countries coming in trying to change them. They've always ended up back to square one, the way they've always governed themselves. And we don't understand that, but I don't know how you change it either, because as I keep repeating, the British have tried, the Russians have tried, and now we've tried for 20 years. And they're still going back and have the same issues and the same problems they've always had when they've governed themselves.
The New York Times article that we're referencing, we've got a Wall Street Journal piece as well, actually 3 Wall Street Journal pieces and a New York Times piece. It concludes with the following: everything depends on the will to fight for the government. And that, it turns out, depends on U.S. presence and support. We're extorting the Afghans to show political will when theirs depends on ours, and ours is gone. And I think to everything that you were just saying, Lance, that's a big part of the point, right? Because you might say, right, just from a number standpoint, again, I'm not sure people really understand this, the Afghan military dwarfs the Taliban. It's some 300,000 people.
It's 4 times bigger.
Who are trained by no less than the greatest military on the face of the planet, right? So, I mean, you would think if you got 300,000 guys who have been trained by the United States of America against 75,000 ragtag, troops, that you ought to be able to, win the day here, right? I mean, at least hold your ground.
Or at least defend the major cities in the area, which was the plan.
That seems like a basic, but then you uncover the whole story of, well, you're not getting paid on time like you're supposed to because people are stealing money, right? And a lot of times the weapons that we gave you, you don't have, or you don't have bullets for, right? Or
because
you don't
they
have
probably
the
have been sold
need.
On the market to somebody to make money.
I mean, I guess I'm asking our listeners to think about, would you be willing to fight for a government like that? I mean, how many of our troops would continue to fight if the United States government said, we don't know when we're going to pay you or your family, right, who you need to take care of. And, we're not sure, we're going to send you with your gun, but we don't know if there will be any bullets that show up. I mean, it's like, what? I mean, we can't even fathom something like that happening, right? The public would be outraged. People would quit fighting. I mean, it would be a mess. It would be awful. And that's what we're seeing here. And then we're wondering, oh, gee, why is this happening? Well, the reason that it's happening now is because we have always been there, right, to fill in all these gaps that take place, because our military is there to say, well, when your guys don't get paid, right, we're still here and we can pick up the slack. So we'll keep fighting next to the people that are still here, even though they're not getting paid. So you don't see these problems, or you're not aware of them, because we're filling in the places where the issues are. And in fairness, we've also let up on the Afghan government in the past year, 2 years, right, where we're not doing quite nearly the close grip that we had on them, saying, you have to pay your people, you have to send these arms there. We're not tracking that stuff the way that we were, or at least not keeping the same level of pressure on. And we're surprised that, all this stuff is going wrong. And that's what I was getting at with nation building. We're going to continue to look at what President Biden's opinion of the situation is, and also our own opinion, and what do we do, right? I mean, if we're not just for continuing down the path that Biden has laid out, which we'll talk about, where do we go from here? I mean, what is the alternative? Because I think we're hearing a lot of criticism. We're not hearing a lot of how should it be done differently. And as you know, that's part of what we want to talk about. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
I hinted at it at the end of the last segment, Lance, but nation building is no small task, as I think most Americans that have lived in the past 20 years have become aware of, right? This is a complicated, very difficult thing to do, especially when you're dealing with a country that's as old as time, who has lived a very different way than the way that we've told them that they should, now live. And so I guess here's what I want to make sure that I'm clear about. When I have said that, because we've talked some about this idea of statehood and, being open to more countries and all this stuff. When I talk about those things, I talk about a lasting commitment in perpetuity, right? Because I think that that's what it takes. I think that that's what history shows us. The reason the Soviets failed and the reason that the British failed and the reason that we're about to fail is because we all, for some reason, were under this illusion that our commitment ends. You want to build a nation, you have to stay there to make sure the nation succeeds. Because what we're doing, let's just be honest about it, right? Is Afghanistan, you could say, people say, DC is the 51st state or, Puerto Rico is the 51st state. Afghanistan is the 51st state, people. They've gotten way more money than Puerto Rico or Washington, D.C. has in our presence there, probably than a lot of the U.S. states put together, in terms of federal aid, right? Commitment and the number of Americans that have died defending Afghanistan, right? So look at it as what it is, right?
Interesting thought, right?
We call it a separate nation, but we conceive the government, we've decided who's in charge, and we've defended it to the tune of thousands of dead Americans. So I'm not sure how much more of a state of the United States you could be, and now we're saying, well, good luck. It's like, we're going to exercise New Mexico and be surprised that they're going to have trouble, with dealing with the world and with themselves and with Mexico. And, we would think that crazy, right? If we did that to any other U.S. state, and now we're doing it to Afghanistan and expecting that everything's going to be fine when they've only been, kind of under this real guidance for not even 20 years, because really the first, 5 to 8 years, these systems weren't really in place. We were just busy establishing a military presence and getting things under control. So maybe for 10 to 12 years, and now we expect them to stand on their own and have democracy all figured out. And it's taken us, hundreds of years to figure it out.
Well, remember in that 10 to 12 year period, we changed our entire system of government, because we started out with something called the Articles of Confederation when we announced our freedom.
Oh, you mean so the first thing we tried didn't work?
Yeah. And, we started working on this thing called the Constitution in 1787 and,
and we fought a civil war too, right?
Right.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, you were using the time frame of 10 to 12 years. They've been at this. In the first 10 to 12 years that the United States was at this, we were fighting a war, and we looked at the document that we had started the war with and said, yeah, this doesn't work now. So we need to totally revamp the way we do our governing. So to your point, why then do we think that this was going to be a quick, clean process where we could cut ties and run and expect everything to work? Which is why the few of us who were saying something 20 years ago said, well, if you go in there, you need to go in there forever. Which is why, please give deep thought. Don't have a knee-jerk reaction of revenge. Well, we're going to go in there and get revenge for the towers and for 9/11 and well, but once you step in, you're there for a long, long time, which is a whole lot longer than 20 years. And we didn't do that. And now it's like many other things. We as Americans we don't have the consistency, the grit to stick with something. Well, this is boring. This is hard. This isn't sexy.
And people are dying and we don't really know what for.
Right. And we're spending lots of money and it's in a place of the world that I don't even know about. So, well, let's get out. Now, there are some people that are saying, though, when you get out, this is where a lot of the terrorist activity started from that caused us such consternation before 9/11. So by getting out now, are we opening ourselves? And that's a whole nother question. But by getting out now, are we opening ourselves up to more terrorist attacks on, if not the soil of the United States, U.S. embassies around the world? Because, terrorist attacks have taken place, folks, in other countries, on other countries, but not so much on us since we've been involved here.
If not now, when, right? And his administration says that nobody at the Pentagon can answer that.
Right to that point. If we don't pull out now, then we're there in perpetuity.
Well, yeah, because, the argument is, well, the Afghan government can't stand on its own yet. And his question is, when will they be able to? And the answer is, well, we don't know.
And the people who are in charge who want us to stay don't have an answer.
Right. Well, but that's
what they do, right? They make plans all the time. They should be able to look at him and say, well, you know what? In another 100 years, this ought to be working. Okay, thanks. At least you gave me an answer. Now we can decide whether we want to spend another 100 years there based on this, or 50 years, or another 20 years. But the Pentagon, who is arguing that we should stay, can't give the president an answer on how long we need to stay.
Exactly. And the other thing is the mismatch, which you highlighted that I think is incredibly important, is most Americans were under the impression that when we went here, that we weren't here to stay, right? I mean, we collectively were kind of under the idea that we're going in, we're going to do some stuff, and then we're going to get out of there, right? And so, I mean, in fairness to the American people, this is not what we thought the bargain was either, right? I mean, we thought the bargain was we're going to go in, we're going to kick some butt, and then we're going to get out of here, right? I mean, not to oversimplify, but I think that's what we all kind of were thinking was what we're going to do. And then 20 years in, really what we've done is make Afghanistan the 51st state. And, we need to stay here, and we got military bases and thousands of personnel, and we're setting up a government. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. This is not what we signed on for. This is not what we thought we were signing up for. And there were people saying, not a lot of people, but there were people saying, right, that that's what was going to happen, is that we're going to get there and we're going to realize that we can't just go in and bang some heads and leave and hope that everything's going to be okay. I mean, we could go in and bang some heads and leave, and 10 years later, everything's going to be back exactly the way it was before, right? If not worse.
Because they've existed for millennium. It's not, they've been a country, well, not the country of Afghanistan, but as the people living in this region, they've lived there longer than we've lived in North America as America. You know what I'm saying? I mean, a lot longer. So you're looking at changing something that's been around, as you said, since biblical times.
Yep.
With that lifestyle, with that government, with that, the way they operate. I mean, you're going to change that in 20 years?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I mean, and I think it was a good point too about our history we didn't get it figured out right away, right? We fought each other. We threw out our original form of government in the first, 10, 20 years and had to start over. So what makes us think that a place that, and keep in mind, we didn't even exist as a country, right? We
got to start fresh.
Yeah.
We got to start with a clean
We still had to throw it out and
yeah.
start over. So why do we think that a place that's thousands of times older than we are, is going to be able to accomplish it in less time with more strife and more back history that's more complicated than ours?
I remember the discussions, okay? I was your age, right? Or a little bit older at the time. And it was like, well, we're America. Yeah, those other places failed. We can do what they can't do because we're America. And we do have that thing about ourselves, But then at the same time, when it gets tough, and this is the old guy talking here, we seem to have lost our grit and our stick-to-itiveness that we used to have. Like, we're going to see this through. We as a nation don't have that anymore. I don't know if it's because of, microwave ovens or cell phones or technology, but it's like, where's that thing that I'm going to work hard for something? And we were talking about it before we came to the studio, where you work hard your whole life for something, and then you look back and you're proud and you get to do something because of the time you've put in. Or when you're working with young people and you see them in their 40s and they come up to you and say, hey, thanks for helping me out when I was a teenager. I know I was a real jerk, but you stood by me and helped me. And I just really appreciate that. When do we have that where we're going to put off our satisfaction for 20 or 30 years?
Now that we realize what it is, it's unclear if we want it or not, right? I think it's kind of one of those things of, well, do you really want all these things, to go away? Because, I mean, in fairness, there have been some things that we've gotten done, right, that the British and Soviets didn't get done. And I mean, granted, that was a very different time when they were there, so it wasn't really a priority to advance women's rights. But women's rights is a huge thing that has changed in especially the capital, right, of Afghanistan, that, I mean, just wasn't a thing 20 years ago. For the most part, was non-existent. And
that the Taliban has no interest in.
Right. Yeah. The Taliban's like, women, they're good for one thing pretty much. And so the point is, I think too, this is the question that we want to look at next. If we're not going to stay, right, because it seems like, that's the decision.
Well, we're not. We're
right. We're on the way out here. Then how do we do this the least bad possible? Because I think there are questions about, I don't think that we as the people of the United States should just be okay saying we gave a new way of life to these young people in Afghanistan, in the capital at least, in some of the neighboring cities. And now we're just basically saying, oh, well, good luck. I don't think that that's, to Lance's point, I don't think that that's the way that we ought to do things. Maybe it is the way that we've done things. I don't think that's the way that we ought to do them, because those are the folks that don't want us to be leaving, right? The courtesy of saying, let's figure out how to deal with these people that don't want, if we're not going to be in Afghanistan, what are we going to do about the people that don't want to be there as well? We're getting out because we can just do that. What are we going to do about these other people that don't want to stay? The people that want to stay, the people that want Taliban rule, we're all about self-determination, right? So if that's what you want, that's one thing. But if you don't want that, do we owe those people something? We'll talk about it. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
About 18,000 Afghans who have applied for the U.S. Special Immigrant Visa, as well as their families, remain on the ground in Afghanistan, with about half of those outside Kabul in areas either already under Taliban control or likely to fall soon, according to a congressional aide. In addition, the State Department this month said tens of thousands more Afghans would be eligible for priority treatment under a U.S. refugee settlement program. The new criteria applied to Afghans who worked for U.S. government contractors, U.S.-funded programs, U.S.-based media, or non-governmental organizations, as well as their families. Yet, all these people are still there, Lance. And you might say, well, who cares? Well, just to be clear, these are the people that the Taliban would most be interested in killing, right? Not like, oh, yeah, if you do some stuff and you live the way we want, you can have a life. No, we're going to probably murder you in abhorrent ways.
Well, because these are the people who bought into the U.S. idea of establishing this government and bringing Afghanistan into the 20th, 21st century. These are the people who said, yeah, we like the ideas of the United States. We want to live like America. And now we're leaving them. And you notice that if you look at the pictures today, over the last 3 or 4 days, they're all heading towards the major airport in Kabul, because that's where they think the Americans are. And they're hoping that they'll get out of there, because they understand that without Americans there, their life is in danger.
There's two different things here. There's the what should we have done way back before we came here, right? There's that question. We've talked about that at length. But now there's a different question before us, which we talked about a couple months ago when President Biden, first started getting serious about this and making the announcement, which is now what do we do that we've been there? And we both said at the time that we think this is a mistake, right? This is not the way to go. But now we're going this way. So now what do we do, right? And I cannot say strongly enough that I completely and full-heartedly disagree with us all leaving. until we do what is right and take care of the people that bought into what we were selling and worked hard to deliver on what we were promising. And now we're going to leave them high and dry. I mean, that's that whole, I thought we're about no man left behind, and we're going to leave behind the very people that were literally on the ground doing the work, trying to make happen, what we, right? Not Afghanistan, what we wanted to happen. And I just think it's absolutely wrong to just say, well, yeah, there's this really complicated visa process. And here's one of these crazy things. Part of the visa process is supposedly that you have to get to a country other than Afghanistan before you can come to the United States. I mean, what kind of stupidity is that so you're in an area that's a war zone and the Taliban's closing in, and we might take you after you get through a 14-step visa process if you can get to another country and you can wait for an answer from us.
That same Pentagon that told President Biden they didn't know how long it would take to actually establish this Afghan government to stand on its own legs, told him that even if we pulled out, that we would have 18 months of control to transfer these people out. Well, folks, our window of opportunity is closed in less than 18 weeks. So in deference to President Biden, when he decided to pull out, his advisors told him, we had 18 months to get these people out. Well, we've had less than 18 weeks to get these people out, with the Taliban now taking 4 of the 5 major cities and on the steps of the capital. There's that part of it, and so now, okay, still doesn't answer your question. What should we do? And then I'm going to throw one more thing back at you, Justin, before we close here. And that is, I railed against President Trump when he wanted to cut our ties with NATO and the Paris Climate Accord and said, how are we going to ever be trusted again by our allies and our friends? Well, I'm going to say the same thing now to President Biden. What happens in the next country the United States goes into? The next group of people we go to and say, you know what? We'll help you build a democracy in your country. And they look at us and say, wait a minute, you just said the same thing to the people of Afghanistan. You got some of them to go on board with you. And just as you really got them up and running in this whole nation building thing, you left them high and dry and they're all dead now. Why would I join up? Why would I hook up with you? Our point is that it looks like we're doing this anyway, but how much are we losing? We say, well, we're not going to lose any more American lives. We're not going to be spending $83 billion a year trying to pump up the government. But how much are we losing? Are we losing more than we were spending by pulling out?
And we're already sending 8,000 back, right? I mean, we're sending 8,000 more now because the Pentagon's saying, we're not even going to get our own people out, let alone any of these other people, if we don't do something, because they're literally going to be in the city. And the State Department said, we're going to get a lot more flights out and save these people. Well, that's when you thought you had 18 months or even 18 weeks. You may not have 18 days before the Taliban overruns the city and takes over the airport. Then what do you do? Now it's going to take 50,000 more troops or whatever? Or is it just going to be, the atrocities are just going to be enormous and be a black eye on the United States? That's my fear. Because I don't know, I don't have an answer for you, Justin. I don't know what we do at this point. Because we've already pulled out the troops. We're already losing ground. I think the thing that we have to do at a minimum is...
do we start drone attacks? Do we start bombing attacks to push the Taliban back out off the outskirts of the city to give us times to try to fly planes in and out to save people?
I think you have to. If it's me.
I don't understand how this all works, but I guess that's the only thing I've got.
If we've committed, to this of we're leaving, then we need to commit to, at a minimum, right? All these people that I mentioned, all those U.S. supporting individuals who were literally under the employment of the U.S. government or under the employment of the Afghanistan government with U.S. support, or were working for U.S. companies, any of those qualifications, there should not be a 14-step visa process. or at least not to get out of the country, right? You should immediately be able to be, because these people, before all these, we're going to bring terrorists in the U.S. No, we're not. These people have been working for us for 20 years in Afghanistan, right? If they wanted to do something, they would have done it already. So don't start in on that. These are people that have been vetted by the U.S. government, so they're as safe as they can be. I'm talking about the people, again, that worked for the U.S. government. If they want to leave, them and their families should immediately be brought to the United States as soon as we can get a flight. And then if we have to hold them for a while so that we can do the whole visa process, I don't love that, but I'm okay with that. But they should not have to wait in Afghanistan where they're likely going to get killed while we maybe get around to processing visas, which, by the way, U.S. Congress people have admitted they don't know the process. I mean, this is completely crazy that we're going to tell them they have to wait there and then get to some third country after the Taliban has control of the capital in order to get to the U.S. No, sorry, that's wrong. That's not how that should work. So at a minimum, I think we have to secure the capital long enough to get these people that we owe nothing less to than at least letting them keep their lives, to the U.S. I think that we should also use that time to figure out, what about all these women and all of their families, particularly in the capital, who have built a life around, like this lady that runs a very respectable nonprofit organization that's doing a lot of good in Afghanistan. She's built a professional career. She's running a nonprofit. That ain't going to happen, folks, when the Taliban takes over. She'll probably be killed. That's probably what will happen. I would go so far as to say we also need to provide a pathway for the people that want to leave. Because again, if you want to live there under Taliban rule, we could talk about that for days, but that's your choice, right? But if your choice is, I don't want to die and I want to keep all these things that America gave me, then America should make good on that promise. Because I think that minimizes, Lance, the damage to the rest of the world. Because it's like, look, at least if we come in and we try and then it doesn't work, we're at least going to take care of you, right? And you can trust us that we're not going to leave you behind and leave you high and dry. Right? We're going to at least give you an opportunity to come with us when we leave. So that's where I'm at least on the bare minimum.
It sounds good to me. We've tried to give you some perspicacious insight today, but then that's what we do here, right, Justin? We have a mission here at True Chat, and it is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And we've done that. We've been open and honest with you, and we hope that you let us know how you feel, whether you agree with us or disagree with us, because we appreciate the emails either way. Send it to podcast@thestateofus.org. That's podcast@thestateofus.org. And as you're having these conversations and people say, well, where can I listen to this thought-provoking show? You tell them that they can find us on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is available Tuesdays and Thursdays as a podcast by 4 a.m. Eastern Time. We're also heard on the weekends in select AM and FM talk radio markets across the country. So check your local talk station. If they don't carry us, call them up and say that they should. For the State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.